Okay, great. We'll go ahead and get started. So my name is JD Vogt. I'm a Senior Director of Analytics UX at Salesforce.
My name is Raymond. I'm a lead product designer at Salesforce Analytics UX.
Awesome. So I'm going to just talk, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about one of the products that we make and just how we design things for our users in it. And just to give you an idea of what we work on in analytics, we have kind of three big product areas. One is what we call operational reports and dashboards. So think of like TPS reports, that's what those get run through. And then we have Einstein Analytics, which is a analytical tool meant for handling really large amounts of data sets, hundreds or even billion rows that you can do analysis on. And then we have Einstein Discovery, which is a AI machine learning way to look at your data and learn interesting things about it. So tonight we're going to mostly talk about Einstein Analytics, and I'm just going to show you to start off with just a couple examples of some of the dashboards that we make for users. These are some of the out-of-box things. The tool is something that allows you to make whatever you want. And this is a pipeline chart, or a trending sort of chart with a pipeline. So just so you know, for those of you who are not salespeople, opportunities, you see like down there it says opportunity details. Opportunities are like deals. So these are deals I'm working on. And then salespeople are very interested, well, I should say sales operations people are very interested in like how big are the deals and when are they going to close and when do we get the money in and that sort of thing, so that we can stay in business. So that's what a lot of this tracks. This is a chart about white space, and white space is these are areas that you could potentially sell into that are kind of similar to what you've sold into, but you haven't yet. So it is, you call it green space, right? It's like green country. These are things you could sell into. Whoops, did I skip one? Yep, so this is like a sales stage analysis. So across there's different stages that things go through, and you can see where things are, or do things get stuck in certain stages. Salesforce also does service. Service is like when you call into a call center and you have a problem with your product or something like that, and you want to learn out, figure it out. And so these are some examples of things like, call volume and that sort of thing. So at Salesforce, we have 4 design principles that we use when we're thinking about putting these designs together. And these are clarity, efficiency, consistency, and beauty. And so we're mindful, one, as we make UIs for our customers and experiences, is it clear to them what they should do next and how they get through things? Is it efficient? They're not doing the same thing over and over again. Is it consistent so that when they learn something one place, they can pick it up and take that learning and use it someplace else? And is it beautiful? Have we taken the time to craft an experience for them that they are going to appreciate and use? And I'll tell you one other thing that's kind of particular to Salesforce culture is that whenever there's a list and you're presenting in front of a room or execs or whatever, that list has to be in priority order. So you got to put these things like, what's the most important thing that goes to the top, and then so on down, because it shows some intention about how you're thinking about these things. And so we did that exercise with these principles as well, and we put them in this order because we felt like something could be really beautiful, but if it was inconsistent and inefficient and wasn't clear, like it's not that great of a product. And so that's how we stack ranked it. When we look at designing information, this is pretty similar to most design sort of patterns. So we'll have sort of this part where we empathize with our users. Then we ideate, like what kind of things could we show them, or how they want to move through this experience. And then we put things together and we test it either with first among ourselves, or we show it to other users and get feedback on it. And so let's just talk a little bit about empathy. This is really the understanding the audience, and it's the bedrock of good design. So often we have to get into the shoes of our users and live their life a little bit to understand what it is exactly they want to do, what do they want to learn, what do they want to understand. And so what we found is pretty useful for creating what we call analytical apps is figuring out a path of inquiry. And so to do that, we'll figure out like, okay, what are the goals that they're trying to accomplish? And then we'll list out, okay, what are all the questions that they're going to be asking, kind of in order as they go through to reach that goal. And then we'll group all the sort of similar questions under a theme. So like an affinity diagram, we prioritize those questions, and then we identify the metrics, like what metrics are going to best answer that question. And then from that, we'll identify relevant business actions that people want to take, and then you're at the end. So then you have an outcome of like, hey, we have a clear understanding of who's going to be consuming this information, and how are they going to move through it, and what actions they want to take at the end. So we have like a continuous loop. And so when we do this exercise, you can do it on a whiteboard, or with customers, or even internally. It just looks like this, right? So it's pretty simple. You just write down all the things, make some indentations, and you mark down like, hey, here's the metrics that we know we want to show, so that when we actually go into a tool or start designing things, these are the things that we want to track. These are the sort of things that people are going to want to know. A lot of times we do this with our users. So we'll go on site and help them build some of these things. So even though we make a product as a platform, it's really great for us to get like hands-on with them and see like really individual use cases, because it enlightens us on how we can make the product better. And in that upper right corner, that's at Dreamforce, which is the crazy extravaganza that happens every year here in San Francisco and clogs up all the streets and restaurants for you. This was a pretty fun exercise where we made a worksheet, and then we made stickers of all kinds of different charts. People could peel off the sticker and put it on the chart on the worksheet where they wanted to, and they could write in like what this chart meant to them. And they found that a really useful exercise to take a step back and be really intentional and thoughtful about what they were putting together. And then they took this home and started applying it. So another thing we're conscious of as we're designing these things is what is the overall information organization and architecture of these different pages and what's on the page. So we'll just utilize things that are pretty common or commonly used. So an F pattern, is a very common sort of thing you see on web pages, and eye tracking studies show that this is a real thing and people do this. Same with like a Z pattern, especially on something like a mobile device where it's kind of a short distance across, but people will read across, go down and look across. So we're just taking advantage of those things people innately do as to where we want to put information on the page. And another common thing we'll see in analytics is like a side by side, because people want to make comparisons between two different things. And so here, this is like kind of a breakdown. So some of the screens I showed in the beginning, here's how we've been structuring those apps, right? And you can see over in the blue on the right, there's the global header, page title and actions. Then we have the KPIs at the top. So what are the main things on this? What are the goals they're trying to accomplish? We've got those as gauges going across. And this is like the home page for a sales analytics app. And so there's a bunch of navigational pieces on there. This is more of a leaderboard. And so we've created this big hero chart in the middle, right, to kind of suck your eye into it and grab your attention. And then, there's interesting stuff to do in there. A lot of times we found it's very useful as well for these sort of users, is they want to see details as well. So we're talking about the table earlier, and people still want to see tables as well. So when they might facet down on something, so you can do filtering and maybe pick one of those people. You can see just their deals, but then you can see like the actual rows underneath it and potentially take action. There's a waterfall chart. Again, this is sort of like the hero chart area for it and the details underneath. This has more of that F pattern on it. And so the KPIs are on the left, hero charts in the middle or on the right. We got some related inquiries, because maybe you asked that kind of first question in your head, right? But then there's a couple of other questions underneath it, and you can click on those things and stuff facets underneath, and you can drill into those questions underneath it as well. This is the white space thing we saw earlier. Again, just sort of like, now we're using a graphical filter to push down on things, and that's side by side. And so what we've made here, right, is like, this is that path of inquiry that we were talking about earlier. So this is, if you come into this sales app, you're like, how are things looking? Where should I go? And if you're coming into this, you're like, okay, well, how are we doing against quota? And then that you don't like that answer, you're like, well, what does the pipeline look like? Okay, there's not that much in the pipe. Well, who else can we be selling to, right? Or what are we pitching into who, and who can we sell to? So there's that natural progression of how a person is going to approach the product and think about it. We're not just putting like the benchmarks on the homepage of that, right? Like, here's how many phone calls you guys made this week, right? It's more of we're supporting that path of inquiry. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Raymond, who's going to talk more about crafting your visualization.
Yeah, thanks, JD. So I'm going to go through a couple of kind of basic tips and tricks that you can use when you're crafting visualization. But to begin with, we're going to talk about some chart types. But to begin with, bar charts are easy to make. If you disagree, let me know. But these are just a couple of examples that I pulled from Google, and it's kind of easy to make these bar charts, right? That really don't convey a lot of meaningful information. And so to avoid that, it's really important to know your data and understand your intent. So what is your data about? Is it about time? Is it about geographic location? Is it about sales data or whatever? And think about the intent that you're trying to portray. And to go back to what JD was saying, understand the questions that you want to answer, right? Are you trying to answer questions about trending data or sales data? So with those kind of 2 bullet points, you can start thinking about your charts a bit more intentionally. So for example, if you want to compare things about chart, pretty basic, pretty easy. You can clearly see which one is longer or shorter. Trending, line chart, super straightforward, right? You can see whether something is going up, going down, or staying flat. And pie or donut chart, which sometimes kind of have a bad rap, but in some cases, it's actually really useful for showing relative makeups of things. So you want to see that something is a third of the full composition. And if you're primarily interested in one particular metric, right, you can measure it against a goal. Are you meeting the goal? Are you going over it? Are you under it? And going to something that's a little bit more complex using distribution chart. You can think of heat maps, for example. This tends to be a little bit more information dense. So maybe use it with caution. In this example, we're showing volume and profit of goods sold by type and region, right? So you can see within that little table, which one is the most profitable and which one sells the most amount of goods. Location, if we have geo-related data, a map is a natural choice for that. Sometimes if you're more interested in basic numbers, a basic bar chart might work better, but if the location is important and you're trying to situate that within a map, then use a map. And something that you see a lot in the previous presentation, the Sankey chart, which is really great for showing flow or showing a breakdown of things. And those are a couple of basic examples of chart types that you can use. And when it comes to colors, there's also a couple of considerations that you should keep in mind. First off, using color is super useful when you want to point out certain things in your analytics apps or in your dashboard. But oftentimes, it's really helpful too if you have other information sent. Right? In this case, we're using not only the color, but also the plus and minus sign, and also the arrow going up and down, just to kind of reinforce the meaning of that. And it's also important to note that using colors alone sometimes is not helpful for those who are colorblind, right? So you have to take that into account and just add when possible additional visual cues to help reinforce the meaning of those colors. Secondly, contrast. Your chart has to be readable on a screen or on a mobile device or wherever it might be. If the user can't read it, then it's not useful at all. and try to exercise some constraints. Typically, we found that a 5 or maybe 6 is a good upper limit, where a user can understand the grouping and being able to distinguish those groupings effectively. And if you find that there's way too many categories, maybe consider alternative ways of bucketing the information. And recently, our research team did a little color study, and we found some interesting things about this. And the source is linked over there, and you can read that if you're interested. But the first point is our findings around light and dark themes. So a lot of users actually prefer the light theme when they're looking at the dashboards or analytics apps in Salesforce. But when we look into the data, actually they perform a little bit better in the dark theme. They're able to kind of answer the questions and get to the data a little bit more quickly in the dark theme, although the difference isn't super significant. So what we've done as a result of that finding is we kind of use the light theme as a default, and in some cases we use part of the dark theme here and make it a hybrid layout. So we use the dark background to highlight certain charts on the page. And you can see examples of that here and also in the screenshots that JD showed earlier. And the second finding is around color palettes. So we're looking at gradual gradient palette. Here you can see from dark green to light green over there, or dark purple to that cream color versus something that's a little bit more discrete, right? Different colors that are shown in a sequence. And we found that users initially preferred this, but again, as we look at the performance data, the non-gradual palette performed better. And that is really a result of them being able to distinguish the different categories. That is a little bit less easy to do with the gradual gradient palette. And the point of that is really using research to come up with this data-informed decisions. And when we find out about that, what we do is that we build in those defaults within our tool, right? So that the user is starting off with something that is good out of the box, which of course they can customize further if they want to, but we're giving them good options to begin with. So I am going to do a quick demo of our tool, Einstein Analytics. So what's great about interactive visualization is that the user can slice and dice their data in different ways, and they can look at their data from different angles so that they can derive correlations and insights that they may not know about before. And we at Salesforce tend to think of analytic apps rather than dashboards, because apps tend to be more layered, they're more rich, and they're more interactive. So in this example, we have the accordion layout, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, that allows the user to look at different data. And then the point of this is that we're kind of filtering the information a little bit, right? We're progressively disclosing stuff to them so that we reduce the amount of noise that the user is looking at in the beginning. I'm going to show you another demo here. The information that is displayed on an app does not have to be uniform throughout. I mean, you can see here there's a couple of different examples, right? There's a line chart to show trending, a donut chart, and then some basic numbers, a matrix, and even a table. So these are displaying the data in various ways to answer different questions. And again, this is a high-level data, but we can drill in and then see more details and see the data from a different angle, where we can apply different filters if it would let me go. This card right here is showing you the data from a certain angle, right? It's filtering it down to technology and state California. But what if we change that to all state? We see how the numbers change. And what if we change that to furniture, for example? Again, the numbers change again. So we're kind of peeling off different layers of this data and looking at it from various angles and maybe find out about things that we didn't know about. So the last one that I want to show is this quick command center demo, where here we see a page that shows a high-level data of this regional sales manager, and we're kind of using an additional layer of map to show the location and how the organization is divided up. And again, we're talking about layers and different angles of how you might see the data. So here we can drill in and look at how that is for that person, how they're doing. Are they meeting their target? How far along they are? How they are doing compared to last year? What is the number so far? And again, just providing a little bit more context and details when possible. And here we can also look at the organizational structure. Again, this is answering the question of, how is this team organized, right? Like that, for example. So the point of all of this is that we can make our dashboards or analytic apps a little bit more rich and engaging. A dashboard does not have to be plain with tables and bar charts. We can make it a little bit more inviting and more usable so that a user would want to use and explore this. And by exploring and using these analytics apps, they can discover new meaningful insights, right? What if we, for example, put on photos in the apps, right? So that people can put names to faces. What if we put different interactions that are a little bit closer to our consumer apps? So all this is really done to make the experience for our users a little bit better. And with that, I'm concluding the demo and giving this back to JD.
Okay, great. Well, I think we're really pretty much done. Just to kind of wrap up would be, where are we here? Yeah, just to summarize. So, start with, keep in mind, start with principles, define what the principles are for your product or your project. Make sure you empathize with your users. You understand who they are, where they're coming from, what they really want to do. Create an underlying architecture of the information and map that out so that you have good chunking and there's like good areas of, people can kind of move around and they understand where they are. Make sure you choose the charts that convey the right sort of insights. Be mindful of colors and the constraints. And as you can see and even if you have an app that can do this sort of motion, this sort of thing, think about how people are going to move through it that way as well. So you can kind of progressively disclose information as they go through their analytical journey. And with that, thank you very much.